Welcome to the Meditation Nest. Here, bedtime stories become gentle meditations designed to help your thoughts unwind as you slow the tempo of your life and embrace the night ahead. I invite you to slow your breath, soften your thoughts, and find peace as you listen. This is your time to rest, reflect, and dream. Tonight's story takes place during the quiet hour when most of the world has gone still. It is a story about a woman, a small kitchen lit by a single lamp, and a ritual that arrives long after the glow of the day's screens has faded. In a world that moves quickly, where thoughts scatter across messages and notifications, she discovers a quiet practice that gathers the mind again. A bowl, warm water, tea leaves opening slowly. Tonight's story is called Midnight Tea. Now allow your breathing to soften. Let the weight of the day begin to drift away. And as we begin, imagine the calm hush of midnight settling gently around you. Long after the city quieted, when the last train had passed through the distant station and the streetlights hummed softly outside the window, Aiko remained awake. The apartment building had grown quiet. No footsteps in the hall, no distant televisions, only the faint ticking of the kitchen clock and the pale glow of a laptop resting on the table. For hours, she had been moving between screens, messages blinking, documents open, windows stacked upon windows. The world had grown used to living this way by the year 2026. Connected always, informed instantly, minds moving through countless small fragments of attention. Aiko closed the laptop slowly. The sudden darkness of the screen felt like a deep breath. For a moment, she sat there, hands resting on the table. Her thoughts still moved quickly, like wind through tall grass. Fragments of unfinished work floated through her mind. An email she had not answered. A meeting waiting for tomorrow morning. Yet something older than those thoughts stirred quietly within her. A memory, not of a place exactly, more of a feeling. Years earlier, during her visit to Kyoto, she had once watched an elderly woman prepare tea in a small garden pavilion. The movements had been deliberate, measured, graceful. Each action carried the same quiet intention. The woman had explained very little, but the stillness of the ritual had lingered with Aiko long after the journey ended. The apartment had grown quiet in the way homes sometimes do after midnight, where even the walls seemed to settle into themselves. Her phone rested on the table beside her, its screen occasionally waking with a faint pulse of light, as if the world beyond the room were clearing its throat or asking for attention once more. Messages waited there, news, small obligations that would still be waiting in the morning. She turned the phone over gently, placing the dark glass face down against the wood. The room seemed to exhale. Outside, the streetlight brushed pale gold across the window. Somewhere far away a car passed, its tires sighing against the pavement before disappearing into the larger quiet. She rolled her shoulders once, slowly, and felt the weight of the day shift just slightly. Midnight, she had learned, was a doorway if you allowed it to be, and tonight she would make tea. Aiko rose from her chair. She walked into the kitchen. The shelf that held her tea bowls was small, but she never hurried this part. Her fingers hovered over the ceramics, each one holding its own quiet personality. One bowl was smooth and pale as river stone. Another wore a deep glaze the color of rain-soaked earth. But her hand paused at the one she always seemed to reach for at midnight. It was imperfect in a way she had come to appreciate. The rim dipped ever so slightly on one side, and the glaze pooled darker near the base, where the kiln's heat had lingered longer than expected. When she lifted it from the shelf, the bowl felt warm from the room's air, its weight resting comfortably in her palms. She turned it once, studying the lip. Perfection, she had once been told, had very little patience for living things, but imperfection left room for breath. This bowl, she thought, understood that. Her tea kettle sat quietly on the stove as she ignited the flame beneath it. A small blue circle of warmth in the dim kitchen. At first, there was only silence. Then, after a while, the faintest murmur. Water warming did not rush. It began as a whisper, a shifting of molecules too small to see, but just loud enough to feel if one listened closely enough. She leaned against the counter and waited. The kettle's voice grew gradually, the sound deepening into a gentle hum that filled the room without disturbing it. Steam had not yet appeared, but the promise of it lingered in the air. She found herself breathing in time with the rising warmth. It occurred to her that the water was teaching a quiet lesson. That transformation often began long before anything visible changed. As she opened the small tin of tea, the fragrance rose softly into the air, green and earthy, with a sweetness that felt almost familiar. For a moment, she was somewhere else. Years ago, in a quiet shop tucked between narrow streets, an elderly woman had once shown her how to prepare tea without hurry. The woman's movements had been so unhurried that time itself seemed to slow in response. "Tea does not like to be rushed," the woman had said with a gentle smile. "It opens when the world grows quiet enough." At the time, she had nodded politely, not fully understanding. But standing in her own kitchen now, listening to the kettle begin its quiet sigh, the meaning felt clearer. Tea was not simply a drink. It was a small permission to pause. Aiko lifted the kettle. The weight of it felt grounding in her hands. She poured slowly. Water moved in a thin stream, touching the leaves with a soft whisper. Steam rose in pale ribbons. The leaves began to open, first slowly, then with quiet confidence. She watched them unfold like tiny green fans in warm water. In that moment, she realized something curious. The tea did not hurry. The leaves opened in their own time. They carried no concern for the hour, the schedule, the unfinished tasks waiting in the morning. They simply followed their nature. Her shoulders lowered. Her breath deepened. Even the small act of pouring had shifted something within her body. She cradled the bowl in both hands, letting the warmth settle into her palms. Steam curled upward in delicate ribbons, dissolving into the dim light above the table. She held the bowl for a moment before drinking, not to delay the tea, but to notice it. First, there was the warmth. The ceramic rested against her palms with a quiet steadiness, the heat traveling slowly through her fingers and into the small spaces between them. It wasn't the sharp warmth of a stove or a sudden flame. It was the patient warmth of water that had come gently to life. Her hands seemed grateful for it. Then she noticed the scent. The steam rose in pale ribbons, carrying with it the soft green fragrance of the leaves. There was something earthy in it, like rain touching stone, and something faintly sweet that reminded her of spring just beginning to wake the soil. She breathed in again, more slowly this time. Somewhere in the room, the kettle gave a small settling sound as it cooled. The quiet seemed to deepen around her. Her eyes followed the surface of the tea, where the last movement of the whisk had left a faint circle of foam near the rim. The bowl itself was not perfectly round. The glaze gathered in darker pools along the lower curve, and one small ridge ran beneath her thumb like a subtle path through clay. She turned the bowl. The light from the lamp slid across the tea's surface, turning the deep green into something softer, almost luminous. For a moment she listened. Not for anything in particular, only the sounds that were already there. The distant hum of electricity moving through the walls. The soft brush of wind against a window. Somewhere far down the street, the muffled passing of a late car that would never know this small ceremony was happening. The night was full of quiet companions. Finally, she lifted the bowl. The first sip was warm and gentle. The taste both simple and deep, as though the leaves had gathered a small piece of the forest and dissolved it into the water. It spread slowly across her tongue, soft and slightly bitter at first, then rounder as it settled. She swallowed, and in that moment, the world felt very still, unhurried. The warmth of the tea moved through her chest like a quiet lantern being lit. Outside the window, the city remained dark and still. Somewhere far below, a late bicycle rolled along the pavement. Yet inside the small kitchen, the moment felt strangely ancient. Water, leaves, warm clay. These elements had existed for thousands of years before the first glowing screen ever appeared. And here they were again, quietly returning the mind to balance. When the tea was gone, the bowl remained in her hands a while longer. The warmth faded slowly, retreating into the ceramic until the surface felt once again like the still air of the room. She sat it gently on the table. Outside, the night continued in its steady rhythm. A breeze moved through the branches of the trees beyond the window, and somewhere in the distance, a single dog barked before the silence folded back along the street. Nothing extraordinary had happened, and yet the world felt subtly rearranged. The noise of the day had loosened its hold. The mind, once scattered, had gathered itself quietly again. Midnight had done what it often did for those willing to meet it gently. It had returned it to herself. Aiko remained seated, her hands still wrapped around the warm ceramic. She remembered another idea from the Kyoto garden. The tea master had once said, "A bowl is valuable because it is empty." At the time, she had nodded politely, and again, now the meaning felt clearer. The bowl welcomed tea because it carried space. The mind welcomed calm in the same way. Only when it released its crowded noise could something quiet arrive. The world often praised fullness, full calendars, full inboxes, full schedules. Yet the deepest rest lived in emptiness, in pauses, in midnight hours where no voice asked anything of you. Aiko poured another small bowl. The movement felt slower now, more fluid. Each gesture carried the same calm rhythm. Lift, pour, pause, sip. With every movement, her mind grew quieter. Time passed quietly. Eventually, the kettle cooled. The tea leaves rested along the bottom of the bowl like tiny folded sails. Aiko rinsed the bowl carefully. She dried it with a small cloth and left it on the counter beside the kettle. Then she turned off the kitchen light. The living room cast a small pool of light across the wood, illuminating the uneven rim and the faint swirl left by the whisk. Soon the warmth faded from the clay, and again the bowl grew still. Outside, the night moved forward in its slow and patient way. Hours later, when the first thin ribbon of morning light found its way through the window, it would touch the edge of the bowl and turn the glaze softly gold. But for now, the room belonged to midnight and the quiet work of rest. Aiko walked toward the bedroom window and looked out over the quiet city. Soon the morning would arrive. Screens would glow again. Voices would return. Something, though, had changed in her. A small ritual now existed within her life. A doorway she could enter whenever the world grew too loud. A bowl, warm water, leaves opening slowly. Her midnight tea ceremony would wait patiently for her, just as it had waited for centuries. The end. There are moments in life when the mind becomes crowded with noise, tasks, voices, messages, expectations. And in those moments, the most powerful remedy often arrives through the smallest rituals. A warm cup held in quiet hands. A gentle pause between breaths. A midnight moment where the world asks nothing of you. Tonight, allow yourself that same permission. Let the thoughts of the day loosen their grip. Let the mind grow calm, like warm tea resting in a bowl. Allow the quiet rhythm of the night to carry you gently toward rest. And as sleep arrives, remember this. Stillness is always waiting. Sometimes all it requires is a small moment of care and a warm cup held beneath the midnight sky. Good night. As this episode comes to a gentle close and the world outside grows quiet, may you find comfort within your own meditation nest. Let your mind settle softly. May tranquility wrap around you, inviting deep rest and serene dreams until dawn. If you'd like to help keep the meditation nest aglow, please consider buying me a cup of coffee by visiting ko-fi.com/BethPodcast. Every small kindness helps the light travel a little further. You can also access a free weekly blog on substack.com. Check the show notes for links. Until we meet again, rest in the quiet knowing that you are safely held by the night.